In this video, we're going to talk about creating objects in Java. Now, before we can create an object, we kind of have to have a high-level understanding of, well, what is an object? We hear about it all the time with phrases like object-oriented programming. We hear that languages such as Java are object-based. So what exactly is an object? Well, a way to look at it is we have this concept of a class. And a class is really, it's a blueprint or a template for creating instances of objects. So for example, if I was a car factory, if I think of the original Ford Model T, for example, that car was available with one color. It was black, and there was no options on it, but they had a template, a way of creating those cars. So every instance of a car was exactly the same. They would put different license plates on them. In Java, the idea is that everything is an object. Just like in, if you look around your desk, you would have like a pen object, or you might have a calculator object, or you might have a water bottle, all kinds of different things. Well, the idea is when you're programming, you're going to create a way to represent those physical, real objects inside of a computer. So here we have a nice little, high-level blueprint of the Star Trek Enterprise, and the idea being every time they create a new Enterprise or a new starship, I guess, they would follow this blueprint. They would give it different, maybe different call numbers instead of NCC 11701. There, might have a different call number, but it would be the same ship over and over again. They'd have the same torpedoes, same engines, all those things. So today what I'm going to do is we're going to build up to creating a card game. We're not going to create the card game in this particular video, but what we will do is we'll create cards. So let's take a look at cards. So here we have a card, and you're used to seeing playing cards like this. They usually go from 2 through 10, and then you have a jack, queen, a king, and an ace. So if we're going to create an object or a class, what we need to understand, we first have to think about, well, what is it, our object? How do we describe our object? So if I look at this card, I say, well, that's the ace of spades. So I would need to figure out some ways to store the information about the card. So for example, I have this face name, okay, this idea that it's an ace. We have the suit. In this case, it's spades. So I know that we are looking at the ace of spades. Now, that on its own would typically represent a card, but then there's this other piece of information that we intuitively know, and that's the idea that an ace beats all the other cards. So there's 13 other cards. So we have this idea or concept that each card probably has some type of face value, okay? So you can compare the cards. And then the other thing is, if we want to have a visual representation of our card, right? Like in this case, I have an image of the ace of spades. So one of the attributes of my class would also be, I'm going to call it card image, and it would refer to a specific image, a JPEG, that I've called ace of spades, just so it's easy for me to understand where this image is stored. So let's go into NetBeans here, and let's create a new project, and I'm going to call this card game. So inside the card game class, we need to have this idea of both cards, and then eventually a concept of a deck of cards, and then we could create a game using the deck of cards. So before we can create a deck of cards, we need to create individual cards, at least a class where we can create them. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click here and say new Java class, and I'm going to call it the card class. Okay, so what we have here is our card class, and you can see some important things. The first one here is it's public, and usually your classes will be public, although sometimes there's a reason to make them private. We have the keyword here, class, and that's our way of telling Java that we're going to be creating a class or a blueprint for all cards. So whenever I create a card, it should follow this exact same blueprint. It should have the same instance variables, it should have the same methods, every card will be the same. So let's start with the instance variables. Now, we originally said that each card should have the following information: a face name, a suit, a value, and an image. So let's build those. Excuse me. Now I'm making each of these instance variables private, and the reason there is we do not want anything outside of our class to be able to modify these. An instance variable should be a very controlled thing. For example, the value of this card here is 14. I wouldn't want some other class to be able to go in and change the value of this card or any other card. For example, I wouldn't want all of a sudden the number 2 to have a value of 30, as if 2 could beat an ace, right? I don't want other classes to be able to do that. So I make them private, and what did we say? Oh, we'll make it base name. Okay, and this buffered image, we haven't talked about buffered image yet. It's a class that can handle images, as the name suggests. And I'm just going to add in the import here. So this allows us to store an image in our class, right? So when we create an instance of a card, the card will have a name, a suit, so like ace of spades, a value of ace of spades case would be 14, and then this can refer to an actual image file. So now we have these instance variables, but we need a way to set them. Okay? So to set them, we're going to use a special type of method called a constructor. Now you see, constructors, again, they're almost always public, but the name here is exactly the same as my class name. Okay? It's an uppercase C. Usually you would find with a method, it'd be a lowercase letter to start. In this case, it's uppercase to match our class exactly. And then I'm going to put in some arguments so I can pass information into this class. Now here, so I pass in the suit of our card, okay? So in this case, passing in the string called spades. But something interesting happens here. See, when I click on this, and any development environment will do this, but it's going to highlight all instances of this variable. So here, I can see suit, suit, and suit. But it doesn't highlight this suit up here. And what that's really saying is, so this is a global variable called suit. It belongs to the card class. This is a local variable that belongs to this constructor method. So in order to reference this suit up here, I need to refer to this, which is the card class. So I actually say this dot suit. Right? So now when I click on this, you can see these are related and these are related. So in my constructor, I pass in a string, and then it will set for my instance variable up here. In the next case, because the instance variable and the local variable have different names, I actually don't need the keyword this. I can put it in though if I wanted. Doesn't hurt. Then the other thing that's a great programming practice is, you can see, maybe do that again just so it's, you can see what happened. In NetBeans, and I assume most editors as well, if I go /** and hit enter, it'll actually bring up a big comment here for me, and then I can describe each method. So if I can say the constructor for the card class, and in here I can say suit is equal to spades, clubs, diamonds. This way it's just really obvious for anyone that wants to use our card class what we expect in each of these arguments that are passed into our instance. Okay, so now we have an instance of our card class, and we could actually we can create a card at this point in time, and we could create several cards if we wanted to. But we don't have all of the functionality of a card, really, at this point. Let's take a look. If I say public static void main. So here, if I wanted to create an instance of a card, I could. So I could say card, that's the type of object I'm trying to create, and let's call this one ace of spades equals a new card object, and the suit will be spades, and the face will be ace. And then to read our image, what we need to do is I'm going to use a special class called image.io, and then I'm going to get it to read a file. Now, in Java, you actually have to explicitly tell it it's a file. So I'm going to say, well, it's a new file, and I'm going to call this one ace of spades.png. And this is going to give me a few little, you can see we don't have the this class defined yet, this image.io class. If I look up here in my imports, I don't have it yet. So if I go over here to the light bulb and I left click, I can see it's recommending that I import that file. And it's got some other things, image.io. And it's also saying we need to add the throws clause, because when it tries to read this file, if that file's not there, it needs to handle it. It needs to throw an exception. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to say, you know what, we'll just that. And you can see here, it will throw an IO exception. Our other option would be to try creating the card and catch the error. But I'm just going to say throws IO exception for today. Now the other thing I got to do is I got to put that file in the right spot. So let's go here to my NetBeans projects. I had a similar project, so I'm just going to copy it. And I'm going to put it right in here. based. So here we can see here's our card game, and we're in the root directory of the card game. So if I go into source card game, I can actually see my card.java file. Okay, so let's go back to our card now. So if we run our program at this point in time, so if I say run this file, oh, it can't read the input file. It blew up. All right. So do I have a typo in here? Let's see. Ace of spades. Sometimes you get a little. I have some underscores in there. Did I not add those? I did not. Okay. So let's try. We'll run this file again, and build successful. So we've created a card. You can't really see much about the card. So one of the things I love to do is to try to give you this idea that we now have an object. Okay, we've created an instance of our card class. I could create 52 or 51 more instances of cards, and we would have a deck of cards, right? So if I wanted to look at the ace of spades, I could, for example, I could say system.out.print, and if I just do this, and I say run this file, what I get is this little card name dot the card class at, and I believe it's a memory address. So it's not really useful information. It doesn't tell me anything about the card itself. And what's happening here is all objects inside of Java are types of objects. Let's pull up an example here for a second. So if I say, so here we have, I've gone to the docs.oracle.com. So this is where all your Java documentation is maintained. And what they have at the top here is just this idea of all the different layers of classes. So in this case, I just clicked on a random one called the abstract button, but you can see that an abstract button is a type of JComponent, which is a type of container, which is a type of component, which is an object. And no matter which class you step on or click on here, what you find is everything's an object, right? The parent class is always the same. Object's always the parent class. So what that means is you will inherit any of the methods that are defined in the parent classes above. Okay, so if let's see here. So if I go to the object class, you can see here's the constructors, and then you can have, there's all these methods that you automatically get. So one of them is called toString. It returns a string representation of the object. And what that means is we automatically get this method. We don't have to do anything to get it. And in fact, if we go back to NetBeans here, if I actually went like this, it shows me all the available methods to me. And I can see one called here toString, right? And it says it returns a string representation of the object. And in fact, I think if I click on this, you're going to see here's exactly the same information. So if I call that method, what happens is if you don't write it out, it still gets called. So here, it's not really useful information to us. So what we can do is we can override that method. We can create our own toString method for our class that will create a different way of representing a string. So let's do that. So I'm going to say public returns a string, and in this case, like, you know, our card is ace of spades, or maybe our card could be queen of hearts, but it's always the face name the word of, and then the suit. So let's do return the face name plus the string of plus the suit. Okay, so now when we run our method, we see our card is in fact the ace of spades. And this is often referred to as a get method. So I'm going to get information about my object. Another get method that we would probably need would be the idea to get the face value. So if we go back to our card, our toString method really returns these two items. And then we have to be able to return the value, right? So I'm going to say public int get face value. And then I'll return the face value, right? So that's our instance variable from up here. Yes, sorry, yes, face value way up here. Okay, I'll put a nice comment. Okay, so now I could print out other things about our card. I could also now say system.out.println. Oops. So then I'm going to use, so our instance, or our object that we've created here, our card, is called ace of spades. So now I can say ace of spades dot, and I can see here's all the valid methods for our card. So if I said get face value, I can actually see the comment that we wrote, and if we run this now, I can see it has a value of 14. So I can see my specific card. And if I created other cards, they would have different names, different values. So for example, if I said card, let's go Queen of Hearts equals a new card, and Hearts, Queen, and the Queen would have a value of 12. And then, okay, so here we have both the Ace of Spades and the Queen of Hearts, right? So they're two separate instances of card objects, right? And we looked at earlier, if I wanted to print out information about the Ace of Spades, I could. If I change that to be the Queen of Hearts, and then here I'll get. So now if I run this file, what I'll see is I got two separate cards, right? One's the Queen of Hearts, one's the Ace of Spades. One has a value of 14, one has a value of 12. They're very different things. Now, if I want to get to see this image file, right? We've gone to the trouble of telling each card that it knows how to represent itself. It keeps track of an image, but we haven't really covered how to display those images. So before I can really show you how to display those images, we need to understand how graphical user interfaces, or GUIs, are built up in Java. And you know, in a way, they model a window in your house. And often, you know, if you look at the window in your house, you see one thing, and you call it the window. And the same thing is true in programs. You see a window open, but it's really not one thing. If we look here, like this window that's in your house, I mean, really, there's a frame that goes around the whole thing. You can see there's rails and strips and sashes and stools and aprons and all kinds of things. Then we have, you know, actual different panes of glass in here, all kinds of things. So the same thing is true in Java when you're building up a GUI. We first start off with this idea of a J-frame. And a J-frame is much like a window frame. So it could be, you know, like a window frame is made of wood or vinyl, but it's the thing that goes around the window, goes around the glass. It's the frame. It's not the whole window, it's just the frame. So if we wanted to do that in Java, let's go down here to my main method. Right, so we're in the main method here. And if I wanted to create a window to display our card, or either a card, then what I would need to do is I would need to create a J-frame. So create a J-frame to display our card. So I'm going to say J-frame, and let's call it the window. Go to a new J-frame. Oops, forgot a word, a letter there. Let me just get rid of a couple imports up here. Just so that you can see how I've built this up. Okay. Oops, let's get rid of this as well. Okay. Okay, so now you can see it's underlining JFrame because we haven't used that class yet. But here we can see the data type is JFrame and our variable is going to be called window. So if I click on this, I'll add an import. And you can do a lot of neat things with these. So I can set the size, for example. And in this case, let's make it 400 by 600 pixels. And I can set the default close operation. So if you click on the little X in the window, what's it going to do? And here, let's just say exit on close. So if you click on it, let's exit. And the other thing I can do is I can set it to be visible. Okay. So if you don't set this to be visible, even if you build your window, it'll actually never show. It'll be there, be inside your program, but it'll be invisible. So if I run it now, I've created, this is a window that's 400 pixels wide by 600 deep. You can see I've got an icon in here. The default icon is a little Java symbol. You can change those. And then there's no text up here. So let's go back to our constructor and add in display for a card object. Okay. And if I rerun my program, I can see now display for a card object is up there in the title. So these are very customizable things. But the way to look at it, it's just this frame. All right? It's not the content in the middle of the frame. It's really just the frame and the attributes of how to create and destroy and show the frame. So what we need to do now is kind of like the idea of here, we'd have to put in glass in the window. So, you know, the analogy for glass in it's called a window pane or window panel. So here we have this idea of a J panel, Java panel, right? So it's same as glass. I set it to blue in this case just so you can see it. So let's create a panel. Okay, so JPanel. I'm going to call it the content pane. You have a pane of glass. So I'm going to call this the content pane because it's going to hold our content. So go to new JPanel. And let me just add in my imports. I don't want to get into a lot of discussion right now about what is a border layout or any of the layouts that Java offers. They offer a lot of layouts so that as you add things onto your panel, they'll go in a specific order, and you can set the specific location of items, or you can actually have them dynamically set up through these different layout controllers. What's wonderful about using these layouts is if you resize the window, these will automatically keep things looking nice. If you put the absolute position of things on your GUI and someone resizes the window, sometimes it doesn't look so good. Okay. So the next thing we need to do, once we've got this idea of, so now we have like this idea of a pane of glass. If I had a pencil or some kind of writing utensil, not many things write well on glass. So the concept here is you would actually add, if you wanted to put a note on a window, you would actually add some kind of sticky note, or you'd tape a piece of paper up there or something, and then you would use your pencil to write on that. Well, same thing is true in Java. We call it a label, and it can hold texts and images, and you can place them on a panel. Okay, so in this case we'll say J label. I'm going to call it the card label because it's going to hold the card. It's equal to a new J label. Okay, and so the constructor for a J label allows us to add in either text or an image or both. So I'm going to put in an image. So I'm going to say new image icon, and we'll use our ace of spades dot get card image. Okay, so we're going to have to add in some more imports here. So you see, we're using a lot of different classes here. Oops. Right. So every time I do this, I'm using a new class. So we used a JLabel class, a JPanel class, a JFrame class, and then each of these are instances or objects. So it's a window object, a content pane object. Sorry, these are the variable names. So it's a JFrame object, a JPanel object, a JLabel object, right? So we've created instances of all these classes. And then here, card label, we can set the size. And then really the last thing is, it's sort of like, if I go back to this analogy here of a frame, glass, and an actual sticky note, it's like we have a sticky note, we have glass, and we have a frame, but the note's not on the glass, and the glass isn't in the frame. So what we need to do is we need to put them in. So I'm going to say my content pane, it has a lot of methods for it, and I'm going to add, right, so I'm going to add my sticky note to it. And then the same thing is true for the window frame. The window frame, whoops, the JFrame, it has a method called add, which allows me to add this in. So now I can say window dot add, and here I can put in my content pane, which is sort of like glass, right? So okay. So now, if we run this, we get a JFrame that has a title up here, right? So this is the JFrame object that has a JPanel object inside of it, and inside of that panel we have a label, and the label has a card image. And because we have two distinct card objects here, we created an ace of spades and a queen of hearts. If I go down here, instead of saying ace of spades, I say no, use the queen of hearts card to display, and I run it. Well, the queen of hearts is going to come up. Okay, and you see, because I use that border layout, it always keeps it nice and centered for me as best it can. Now, if I go too small, it's going to shrink it, but that border layout's allowing it to resize automatically. So there you have it. We have created card objects that know how to represent themselves as a string, knows how to represent itself as a number, and knows how to represent itself as an image. I hope you found that really useful, and what we'll do in a future video is we're going to look at how can we combine an entire deck of cards and then create a simple game. Thanks very much.